Welcome to Coffee and Connections with the Chief, and I am the Chief, Chris Warren, and with me is Captain Mark Livy.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Today's program was a, I guess the best way of putting it is the Captain and I had met several times, and we were trying to discuss, since the last time we were with you all, what we wanted to talk about. And I think a lot of things that happen to us on a daily basis feels normal, feels typical to our day-to-day lives, where upon reflection I realize that it isn't that normal or typical to a lot of you all that watch us on this channel. So I think the best thing for us to do would be to discuss a few things that probably occur that you might not understand or figure is fairly typical to us. I have a few things jotted down on my bulleted list to talk about today that I wanted to keep so we can keep on track. One of those is what you see your police department doing. What is it that we're doing out there? You might see the cruiser go by once in a while, or hopefully you'll see one of the officers walking downtown and might even have a conversation with that officer. But what is it that we're doing, or what have we been doing lately? So with that, I noticed that the captain has his list of statistics in front of him. Mm-hmm. So I'll turn it over to you, and you can give us a little overview of what your police department has been up to.
Yeah, so I have these stats, as I mentioned in our last meeting, that I would get into for the 2023 and compare it to 2022. Like that's what we really like to do, to see what direction we're going and what are the expectations for 2024. And as he's mentioned, what are the officers doing out on the road, being visible? You'll see them parked. And why are they parked on the side of the road that sometimes you see them? Before I get into the stats, that's always a common question. They're just sitting there. Well, remember, that's their office. So everything in that cruiser can do at a desk in the PD. So they got a computer, laptop, keyboards, so they can get their reports done much quicker when they're out on the road and still be invisible out there or nearer where a call could possibly come. So it's always nice to understand that and have the knowledge of that to see why they're just kind of parked on the side of the road and what they're doing. They're looking down. They might not be looking out, but they're trying to get some work done and catch up also. But for the stats that I'll get into, so we got a bunch of them. These are the stuff that I really go over during the commissioners meeting, and that's a topic what there's a big change for our commissioners and the meetings, because that's going to change from, it's usually the third Thursday of the month, and now it's going to change to the second Thursday of the month and be later at a time at 6:00 p.m. to be more available for the public, I think.
And the location change.
Yeah, and the location change. We usually do it at the library. Now it's going to be back at the Great Hall, upstairs on the second floor. So I think that's a great thing. It'll allow the public to get there and be more available for them to talk with the commissioners. So in 2023, our incidents for that year, we had 632 cases, incidents really. And in 2022, we had 647. So it actually went down a little.
Now, what's an incident?
An incident is a case that comes in there. So if you go in there, it could be theft, burglary, a DWI could actually become an incident depending on the cause of it. You could have an incident, then an arrest after. It's all, did I say theft? Yep, theft. It's all crimes that are committed by, or alleged to be committed, because sometimes we could investigate it and there's no crime at all by the time it gets there, but we still have an actual report on it. So, and then we have some no crimes, which are your lost items that do come in, because we do get a lot of wallets with money in it, so we generate a report for that. So it's tracked and then given back to the individual if we can find them. So that's a lot of them.
So if someone makes a complaint that is later found to be not a crime, but it could be a civil problem,
Correct.
how does that handle?
So in our thing, basically, we would investigate it to the fullest and right to the end, and when we find out it's a civil issue, we would refer them to where they should be going on that basis. And they can always grab the report from us through a 91A request. And that's how everything kind of gets out of our PD, is always through 91A request.
Okay. And just a quick sidebar, if you will, the difference between civil and criminal, for those of you who don't fully understand that, is, and sometimes an officer will say, there's nothing more that we can do, this is a civil issue or a civil concern, is that a civil case as opposed to a criminal case is one that is a private party versus another private party. And oftentimes, the police are called because a citizen doesn't know what it is exactly they're dealing with. They just know it's not correct or not right. And the officer will help them understand that this isn't something that is against statutory law, where it be a crime against the state of New Hampshire. It would be a private action between two parties.
So, and then the other lines that we look at is assisting. How many officers did it take to do this report or incident or casework? And if we had 632 incidents on our sheet here, it's 107 assisting. So another officer assisted with that case. Could have been at the time of the incident, in the field, or after they actually assisted. We used the detective. Maybe we used the SRO, depending on where we need to do some interviews and stuff like that. So it's helping out each other to get the job done. That's really what it is that we're trying to accomplish. Arrest for the year was 261, and last year was 302. I mean, in 2022 was 302, so the arrest went down. That's not a bad thing, to be honest with you. So what I look again is during those arrests, how many officers, did we have 2 officers at the arrest at that time? And for 261 of those arrests, 152, we had assisting officers there. And most of the time on our patrol shifts, we have a minimum really of 2, sometimes 3 with some overlapping shifts. So it's nice to see that and how many officers were assisting at the time during those cases. Citations, which are motor vehicle stops. It isn't the actual giving out a citation. It could be verbal, it could be a written, but last year we had 2,051 motor vehicle stops. And at that time we had, in 2022, we had 2,347. So it's really right in the same ballpark. So that's pretty good to see. To educate those out there, and unfortunately sometimes that operator will get a citation for any violation that they're doing out there.
How often does that happen, do you know?
I think you had that stat before. You were talking about it at the commissioners meeting.
It's like 1 in 10 or
1
something?
in 10.
Gets
So-
an actual citation.
Yeah, so we're real low on that end. If you compare it to the state, I think you had that too. What was the state average?
1 in 4.
1 in 4. So we could say we do a lot of education out there, but sometimes corrective actions are done by citations too, so when it keeps repeating. So in accidents, this is the one that you actually want to see go down, and unfortunately it went up by 4 actually accidents in 2023. So the accidents last year were 169 compared to 2022 was 165. So actually 4. So those are the ones you really want to see decrease, but those actually increase. And there's many factors. I mean, we live in New Hampshire. We have snow. We have ice.
No, you have deer.
Yeah, we have deers,
A lot
too.
of deer.
So that's a common thing. We have moose and sometimes horses. They do get loose out there. I can tell you because I had to go to one
That was
before.
that was a late night.
Yeah. So, But those are nice to see, these stats that we do have out there, and compare them to the years prior. And really 5 years is really nice to go at and see where we are with the statistics, and then really dive deep into those cases and see what's going on. That's always nice to do. So, give it back to you.
Yeah, you mentioned an interesting thing that I wanted to kind of jump off of, and that was the ratio of stops, of citations to warnings, and how it's so much different. And that was one of the things that I saw almost immediately upon taking the position here as the chief, was that it was so high. And in conversation with several of the officers, they focus a lot on educating the motoring public, which is a great thing. And from that, I'll move to education. As some of you may remember from our previous Coffee and Connection, I spoke about my background, and part of my background is in education. Whereas in the 90s, while still working as a police officer, I went back to university and got my under and graduate degrees in education. And the reason why I did that, I think, upon reflection, was earlier in, I think it was like 1990, 91, I went through training to be a DARE officer. I'm a member of the DARE officers. Mm-hmm. And that was a program that started in the, excuse me, in the mid to late 80s in the Los Angeles Unified School District. And there was a lot of conversation across the nation about DARE officers and what does DARE do, and what good is it, and is it working? And there was a lot of different metrics that different school districts and towns were using to determine whether it was in fact working. My own experience, and I taught DARE for many years in what's known as the core curriculum, or the 5th and 6th grade, the 11 and 12-year-olds, was that it got police officers in the school. And there was some naysayers who were concerned that we were trying to get the kids to report their parents, and we were using them as kind of a confidential informants, if you will, and that wasn't my experience. My experience was more that the kids were starting to understand what the police officers do in their towns, and they were able to ask questions. As an 11 or 12-year-old, I had, I guess, a fearful respect of law enforcement in the community, and I wouldn't have even thought to walk up to one and ask him a question, or ask her how she liked her job. But that all changed with DARE. Yes, there was certainly a curriculum that spoke about the rising drug problem in schools. There was several elementary schools in New Hampshire that had discovered acid and heroin and cocaine in them, and that was in the middle schools. So yeah, there was a concern. So we began that education law enforcement nexus that continues today, and we see it in Wolfeboro through our SRO program.
Yes.
And the SRO program, I was really pleased to see, was in full swing when I got here. There are 2 SROs in the school covering the campus, and this is something that, you know, I had been involved in many conversations in different school districts in the state through different work as a chief, and communicating with other agencies as well, and moving towards bringing different stakeholders of a community together to find out what we need and what can we do to make things better, or to increase or improve the quality of life. And we always come back to this conversation about school resource officers. For those of you who are old enough to remember the mid to late 90s found us struggling with some really tragic events in the United States, most notably Paducah, Kentucky, and Columbine in Littleton, Colorado. And it was then that a lot of parents, myself included as the parent of 3 boys, were thinking, okay, we have a lot of young people in a very confined area, the demographic was such that, what are we doing there? We have police officers in and around our towns, but we have nothing that is watching over for the safety of our children, and we're putting a lot of burden on teachers to not only teach their lessons and assist kids on a day-to-day basis, but now we're asking them to provide security. So there came this movement of SROs where it was not only a law enforcement function that they would provide in schools, but they also were informal counselors, mentors, if you will, and there was even some teaching and instruction, whether it be the DARE program or the GREAT program for the schools that had gang issues and concerns. And it was through that I learned that I wanted to be more informed about how to be an educator and how to do that well. And it actually had transformed into law enforcement. And I can see the connection clearly that law enforcement officers inform, they educate. And so getting all the way back to the beginning of the conversation, the 1 in 10 makes much more sense to me now, provided that that's, it's appropriate to the reason for the stop in the first place and the discretion that the officer has to make a decision whether or not to write the ticket or to give the warning or, that type of thing, or warn on one thing and write a ticket on another. And we do keep track of all those warnings so that if you run into the same person again for the same event, then obviously the warning didn't do anything. So going back now to the SRO, you were involved quite a bit from the beginning, weren't you, with SROs and this town?
Well, yeah, in this town. I mean, there was an SRO when I first came here 21 years ago. It was already established through a grant process, and they had one in here. And then during this position, we worked with the town, with the schools, with the district, and realized that knowing the complex is so large, whether the middle school and the high school, 2 SROs were very needed. And a lot of that, I believe, we saw in these statistics up at the school, because we keep track of it all, and COVID came, and that's where we really saw a change. Once the school started opening up, and after those a year and a half of, what was that, home computing?
Right, the remote learning.
Remote learning, yeah, that's what it's called. So we noticed a very huge difference, especially when it was half remote, half in school. The cases came up, and we're not talking little smaller cases where it can be school discipline, and that's the direction we really went to, letting the school take care of a lot of issues,
right,
which they should. And but we saw bigger cases and problems, and not all that came from the school, but knowing our SROs are very open and easy to approach, there was a lot of kids that came to them to report things. And it could start here, but then go into a different jurisdiction, which is a different town in a different area within the district.
Okay, so how many people are these SROs policing, so to speak?
I believe within these campus, the high school, middle school, teachers, students, I believe it could be around 1,200. I would have to check on that. I can't verify that. But it's in that ballpark, so it's a good amount.
Yeah.
And within the school that comes in here, I mean, you have 7 towns. So just with the traffic in the morning, in the afternoon,
Sure.
Because we all know Wolfeboro, there's only one way on that road of South Main, and if something happens there, it can make challenges. So, but, I mean, 7 towns coming in, a couple of them are coming different directions, which helps out. But that's a good amount of people.
That's quite a bit in a in a
Compact area.
compact, thanks,
Yeah.
a compact area where you see some towns that have that population and they're spread out over 40, 50 square miles, but here we have them all right here.
Right, yeah.
How does it work with having SROs? Like, who pays for that?
So the SROs, so if we look at it, and you look at our budget during our process, you wouldn't really see how it's broken down. I know we had that last warrant article, and that was 2 years ago, and people really, the community understood somewhat of how it was broken down and how the school paid 180 days of the salary and some of the benefits compared to the rest of this year. Because the town of Wolfeboro gets that officer and now 2 officers back during the summer months. So how it's broken down is the school pays 180 days of the officer's salary and benefits, which come out to about $305 a day for each. And that gets paid quarterly to the town.
Okay. And then the town just picks up whatever's left over.
Correct.
And that's an MOU, or?
It's an MOU that we have with the district.
Okay, so we're talking money. Let's talk about something else that I've had a couple people ask me questions about in my travels throughout town, and that is the recent default budget.
Yes.
Where we had this is an SB2 town. We had a deliberative session. They talked about a series of things, and then the town comes back and all eligible voters then vote for the different items that they talked about in the deliberative session.
Correct.
Sound right?
Sounds right.
And the budget that was requested by the town for this year was turned down.
Yes.
So it becomes something called a default budget.
Correct.
So how does that work?
So new to me in this first default budget that I've had that I had to deal with. I enjoy budgets. I enjoy numbers. So how that works, we have the 24 budget that goes in, and then at the end of the process, somewhere February, you know where your default budget would be if it didn't pass. So that's out to the public.
Okay.
So with us, if you break it down just to our 3 budgets, so remember we have the police department's budget, communications budget, and animal control budget. And so it's a bottom line of all 3. So what happens in our budget, you take the 24 budget and it did not pass, so you know what you were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
But as we go to a default budget, it goes back to the 2023 numbers.
Okay.
And that's what we got to work with.
Okay, so there's some things that were requested by, say, the police department, because that's our thing, that because the budget didn't pass, they don't happen?
Not everything.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you look at, well, for instance, we could say the union. So the union had a warrant article, which was in 2000, had to be 23, which they had a 2-year. Same thing as the ASME, which is the other part of the town. That was a 2-year contract, so they approved the contract for 2 years and the money for 2 years. So in that default budget, knowing that you go back to the 2023, the union's money within the police department and communications, which is all full-time employees and permanent part-times, their money goes in based on that contract.
Okay.
So that stuff would go in. Now you can, depending on what you have and what you had in the 2023 budget, it all depends on really the chief of police to see if there's anything in there that we needed for 2024 and we can still purchase, but it's really managing the budget at the end of the day.
And it focuses towards the safety of the public?
Correct.
Okay. Good. Hopefully that's clearer to you now than it was before. Just a couple other things I want to touch upon. I had the opportunity to be interviewed by Luke Frudenberg, who has started a little program on this channel, which I understand talks about local goings-on and things that are going on in Wolfeboro, and very Wolfeboro specific. And he asked me to be his first guest. and I sat in and answered some of his questions. He didn't submarine me with any ones I didn't truly expect, but I wanted to kind of review some of the stuff we talked about just in case you missed that show, and also suggest to you that you check that out as well. He did ask about presence downtown, and we talked about that a little bit last time we were together in this program. But I want to reiterate that officers are, or will be, or should still be, on foot downtown, visiting in and around the community and talking to the local business owners and guests and residents. If you see an officer down there, please, they're not too busy to talk to you typically. Go up and introduce yourself and find out what's going on and let them have that conversation with you. I'm sure that they would appreciate that. Another thing we talked about were some of the goals that I see in the department and moving forward, and not just this year, but just generally, what are my goals? I had a lot, and I had a hard time bringing it down to something that would sound doable. But at the same time, every day we come to work, we attack our goals. We move towards something better than we are yesterday. Some of those goals include the policy updates and moving towards New Hampshire State accreditation, which I won't go through all over again because we did that pretty good last time. We are moving towards the implementation of body-worn cameras. This is a topic that has been at the forefront of law enforcement throughout the country for quite some time, and I have to be honest with you that several years ago when this was first broached, I wasn't a huge fan of it. I thought it was a little tough to get monies for it. It would be a little tough to have it so that it was safe for the officers, and I had this concern that if there was a malfunction of the camera in the middle of an altercation, which, I mean, they're right here, and an altercation could disrupt the recording or even break the camera, then I didn't want the officer to have to defend themselves as to why the camera didn't work. So there was a few things that concerned me about it. But as the technology gets better and I'm able to speak with different police chiefs and police officers who wear them every day, I'm become a fan, and I think it's an important addition onto a police department. Captain Livy has been working quite a bit towards looking into the grants and money opportunities so that you as the taxpayer aren't saddled with this expense. The cameras themselves aren't as much money as the storage and the redaction software and all these other things, but we'll get there, and that is on the top of my list. Another thing is, I mentioned last time that the residents are optimistic here. They're positive. I want to work with that positivity. I want to use that positivity to move the whole community, at least what I can have any say in, to a better place all the time. There's always a step up we can get to. And that is by continuing the conversation with a lot of the community leaders and community organizers and groups and community-based organizations. And I think that's important, and I'm using this Coffee and Connections to ask you, take me up on that. Communicate with me and tell me what I can or we can do for you. We are currently working on replacing some of our vacancies. We have several. We have several really good-looking candidates.
Yes.
And as you'll notice, it's not always the same police officers that you remembered 3 years ago or even last year. It might be a different officer, and you look at him or her on the street and saying, they don't look familiar. That's probably because they're a new officer.
Yeah.
And there's a process that we have to go through in order to hire. At the end of the day, your police commission is the appointing authority, and that's typically after a recommendation by the police chief. I have worked with Captain Livy, and he has taken the helm at getting through the candidates, having that initial conversation with them when they contact us. We advertise through Indeed and
Yes.
anything else?
Facebook and.
Okay, just
Just
the
local
typical
stuff, yeah.
local outreach. And they will have a conversation, and then at the end of that conversation, they may be invited to come in and start the process. And would you go over what that process looks like so that
Yeah.
the folks know what?
So that process for us looks just like this. So, like he said, I have that initial conversation. It could last 30, 45 minutes or so. Get to know the individual, see how interested they really are. A lot switch careers. Some are brand new. Some are just coming out of college. Some are still in college and still looking for it. So it really ranges on that field. So, but from that point on, after I speak with them, we get them in for a physical agility test, which that is a PT. That's under the Cooper standards from the New Hampshire Police Academy. So they have that. So it's a mile and a half sit-ups and push-ups, depending on your age and the requirements that is required to pass those 3 items. So we bring them in, we get that done, and what we've been doing new this year is actually having an oral board right after, which I think has worked pretty well in that last one that we did.
So-
What it does is there could be some people coming from a distance. It makes it a lot easier so they don't have to come back another day. Because some might have jobs and they got to take jobs, take a day off from their work. So trying to get it all done in one day works very well. And usually we have a panel, which we did last time. So I had from communication specialist, a police officer, and a community member. And then they sat in, and we had 3 go through that oral board that last time. I know that seems low, but it's actually, it's really good
Not bad.
in this time of year and climate. So I really started with 7. One couldn't make it to it. Some didn't show that day, and we ended up with 3 going into the
Some
oral
couldn't
board.
pass the
Yeah,
PT.
1 didn't pass the PT, and then 3 go into the oral board. And the oral board really consists of a certain amount of questions. They're given to each and every individual, so it's fair. Sometimes they can, depending on their resumes, they might ask some questions regarding that. And it's really, they're out there alone talking to the panel that.
And we're not involved in that.
No.
It's a closed door with just the members of the panel.
That's correct. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, we sit back. I just get everybody to the show, and then they take the show from there. From that point on, they have some sheets, notes, basically a scoring sheet from each individual, and that is given to the chief for review. And then from that point on, the candidate may meet with the chief after, and then the conditional offer could be given after that.
Yeah, and what I like about this oral board and this process is that both the captain and I can sit down with the members of the panel and just have a conversation with them.
Yep.
What'd you like? What didn't you like? How did you feel in communicating with them? Can you see them as a police officer here in Wolfeboro? Because all 3 of those people know this town. And they, as good of a police officer someone can be, they may not be here. They may be much better somewhere else. We have to fit the person to the town and vice versa. So it's that conversation that helps us to learn if this person is adaptable to the community and if it all fits. The interesting part about the hiring process is, and this was a question actually that Luke had asked me a couple nights ago when we did his program, was what do we use to attract people to Wolfeboro other than the fact that it's a beautiful town? And what am I seeing as a trend in the state or even the nation as far as attracting police officers. And how has it changed since I started? First of all, when I started, I'm not sure if Luke was alive yet, so everybody reminds me of that.
Yeah, I think I was what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the more important part of that is that I've worked in this field and watched several generational changes and attitudes change with those generational changes. And we all have seen that, or we've seen jokes about it, or comments about it, whether it be in social media or on television. It's true. The generations changed. Mine drove my father's generation nuts. We all have that, and it's a constant movement. And I think that the thing that is coming around now is, and we were talking about this just the other day, when I started in law enforcement, that was 1981, and I don't want to know how old you were. However, I would sign up for every possible shift I could get my hands on. I would sign up for every detail. Not because I was some kind of a superhero. I wanted the detail money. I wanted to make as much money as I could. I had just bought a brand new car because I had a great job and the whole bit. But things suffer when you do that. Everything else you do in your life gets put on hold because you're focused all this time and energy on doing the job. This has changed over the years. Police officers of today are looking for balance. They're looking for quality of life balance. Good for them. I understand that and I agree with that. But they're looking for a life balance. They're looking for that time off to enjoy with their families and their friends and to just enjoy what they're working for. They don't want to be millionaires. They're not looking for top dollar and all this money. They want to be paid fairly. They want to be paid for the job that they did, which is kind of interesting because my father used to tell me that. He's like, honest day's pay for an honest day's work. They're looking for benefits for themselves and their family. We're seeing more and more interviewees interviewing us during the process, which is kind of an interesting thing. I never would have thought to even ask a question because it was a different arrangement back in the day. They're looking for continuing education and possibilities for future training and specialization and keeping themselves active. They're taking a look at the equipment. What kind of equipment do we have? How do we upkeep it? How new is it? Is it serviceable? Does it keep them safe? And are they given the proper training to use this equipment? And the most important thing, and the thing that resonates the most with me, is they want to be proud. They want to be proud of their organization. They want to be proud of their occupation. This is something that policing in general has struggled with over the past few years, at least since the summer of 2020 with the unfortunate incident in Minnesota, where a lot of folks across the nation had kind of a lukewarm reception to a lot of law enforcement in and around their communities. I don't believe that was the case here, and I'm finding that really wasn't the case in New Hampshire. New Hampshire has been a very positive state with regard to its support of its police officers. But the country is shrinking. Now, we see things on computer, on social media, or on the news, and it brings it into our living room. And folks that are getting to that age where they're trying to determine what they're going to do for their career path are being influenced by this as well. And it makes it hard to look forward to wanting to be proud of yourself and your occupation. I think we're breaking through that. I see a change. A lot of it falls on the shoulders of the leadership of the agencies. I am very proud of this agency. I'm very proud of the people that work here and what they do. I've watched them as we've been a few officers below what we should be, working extra. And they're not working extra to make all that extra money. They're working extra because they have to. We have to be out there for the safety of the public. We have to man those police cruisers and walk that beat. And these officers have picked that up and said, yep, we'll do that. They want to be proud of who they are and who they represent. And that, when we're showing that to our new applicants, our candidates for the job, they're seeing that, and that's modeling. And I'm proud of our department for modeling the behavior that they should be modeling. And on that note, for one of my things to do on my thing-to-do list is a continuing conversation with the police officers union. As you may or may not know, the full-time officers, permanent part-timers, and the communication specialists are all members of the New England Police Benevolent Association,
Yep.
Which is a union. They have had struggles in the past with management. It's not a secret. I have had a lot of experience in dealing with unions, both as a member of a union and as management. And there's absolutely no reason why we can't work a lot of things out. I'm very open to conversations. The union president is also very open to conversations, and I look forward to working well with them and the police commission and all heading in the same direction. And this, by the way, was a conversation I just had with both of those folks, and everybody nodded in agreement. That's what they want to do. So we'll get there, and we'll have much more positive things to talk to you about with regard to that in the near future. Do you have anything else you want to?
No, I think you really hit it off. I mean, the town of Wolfeboro and this PD is, and when I have those conversations, the initial conversations during the hiring process, it's very easy to sell. This town, this PD, the people that work here. I've always done it for my whole career, even when I was in patrol, trying to get people to come here. This department is a great department, and it's got the potential to be the best. So
We won't stop till we get there. I want to thank you all for coming and watching us for a few minutes, and please feel free to contact the police department if you have questions. If this has sparked any interest in you to want to know more about something, give us a call, let us know, or stop one of the officers as they're walking downtown and ask them the question. If they don't know the answer, they're going to get it for you. And I will return shortly with the safety tip for the month.
no, thank you.
Thank you. Hey, welcome back. We have a safety tip that we like to put out every month. I found that out last month in our first Coffee and Connections. And so as I'm driving over here, I'm thinking about it. I'm not as well prepared as you thought I was. But I realized that you're watching this in April, and April means that a lot of folks, such as myself, will be on a two-wheeled thing called a motorcycle. I love riding the bike. It is one of the best therapeutic things in the world as far as I'm concerned, and I have a lot of friends that ride as well. The one thing I have noticed is there are some dangers connected with riding a motorcycle. Those typically are folks that aren't really paying attention, whether that's using their cell phone or maybe getting the rest of the bagel in your mouth, or checking your makeup in the mirror, or the radio station, or hopefully not texting. Any of these things will keep your eyes off the road long enough to get me into trouble on my motorcycle. I would ask that you keep an eye out for bikes. Certainly keep your eye out for everything, but know that they're coming out. As soon as the salt and sand come off the highway, you'll see me out there. And I would appreciate you giving a couple extra looks before you take the turns onto different roads and that type of thing, and just know the bikes are out. Thank you again, and I appreciate everything that you do, and I hope to hear from a lot of you soon. And I'll see you next month. Thank you.